The diner was nearly empty when he walked in. The kind of late, quiet hour when secrets feel louder than voices. Black coat, cold eyes, the air changing the moment he took a seat. Everyone in town knew who he was. The kind of man nobody looked at twice, if they wanted to stay alive. But the waitress did, not because she was brave, but because she noticed something no one else did. His hands were trembling, his breathing uneven, a strange color creeping up his neck, poison. One look at his cup, one whiff of the bitter scent, and she understood. Someone was trying to kill him. Someone close. His vision blurred as he tried to stand, the room spinning, darkness closing in. "No, look at me," she said, voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. Before he could collapse, she grabbed his face, lifted it toward hers, and pressed her lips to his. The entire diner gasped. To the world, it looked reckless, shameless, insane. But she wasn't kissing him. She was forcing him to breathe, pulling the poisoned air out of his lungs before it stopped his heart. When she pulled away, he collapsed into her arms, alive, shaking, confused. And in that moment, as his men stormed in, guns drawn, the Mafia boss realized the truth. No ally had ever saved his life like that. No enemy had ever come that close. And no woman had ever changed his fate with a single breath. What happened after that night reshaped both their destinies. Stay with me until the end, because what happened after that kiss will make you rethink loyalty, love, and danger itself. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Her name was Elena Martinez, and she had worked the night shift at Russo's diner for 3 years without a single incident. She served coffee to truckers, comfort food to insomniacs, and silence to those who needed it most. The job paid enough to cover her small apartment above the bakery and her nursing school classes during the day. Nothing about her life suggested she would ever cross paths with Vincent Torino, let alone save him from assassination. Vincent controlled half the city's underground operations from the shadows. Drug routes, protection rackets, money laundering. His name was whispered in back rooms and boardrooms alike. Politicians feared him. Rivals respected him. Police pretended he didn't exist. At 34, he had built an empire on calculated violence and absolute loyalty, demanding both from everyone in his circle. But empires built on fear have cracks that run deeper than their foundations. That Tuesday night started like any other for Elena. She tied her hair back, checked the coffee machines, and prepared for another 8-hour shift, serving the forgotten souls of the city. The diner sat at the intersection of 2 highways, catching travelers who needed fuel for their cars and themselves. She had memorized the patterns: who ordered what, who paid cash, who lingered too long over cold food. She didn't recognize the man who walked in at 11:47. Vincent rarely visited places like this. His usual haunts were exclusive restaurants with private dining rooms, places where conversations happened behind closed doors, and every waiter had been thoroughly vetted. But tonight was different. Tonight, he was supposed to meet Marco Castellano, his trusted lieutenant and childhood friend, for what Marco had described as an urgent discussion about territorial disputes in the harbor district. The choice of location had surprised Vincent. Marco typically preferred their usual spots: the back room at Gino's, the private office above the jewelry store, anywhere with multiple exit routes and familiar faces. But Marco had insisted this meeting required absolute secrecy, somewhere no one would think to look for them. Vincent slid into the corner booth, positioning himself with a clear view of both entrances. His dark coat remained buttoned despite the diner's warmth. Elena approached with a coffee pot and that practiced smile she reserved for customers who looked like they carried trouble in their pockets. "Coffee?" she asked, already reaching for the cup. Vincent nodded, studying her face. She was younger than most night shift workers, maybe mid-20s, with intelligent eyes that seemed to notice everything while pretending to see nothing. Her movements were efficient but gentle, the kind of person who had learned to navigate difficult situations without creating waves. She poured his coffee and set down a small pitcher of cream. "Are you waiting for someone?" "Yeah. Should be here any minute." Elena nodded and returned to wiping down tables, but something made her glance back at the man in the corner booth. Maybe it was the way he held himself, coiled tension disguised as casual posture. Maybe it was how his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging every person, every shadow, every potential threat. Or maybe it was simply intuition, the same instinct that had kept her safe during 3 years of serving strangers in the middle of the night. Marco arrived 15 minutes later, carrying 2 paper bags from the Italian restaurant down the street. He slipped into the booth across from Vincent, with the easy familiarity of someone who had shared 1,000 conversations in similar settings. "Sorry I'm late," Marco said, pushing one bag toward Vincent. "Figured you might be hungry. Got your favorite, the veal parmigiana from Benedetto's." Vincent smiled, the first genuine expression Elena had seen from him all evening. "You know me too well." Marco had indeed known Vincent for most of their lives. They had grown up 3 blocks apart in the same neighborhood, attended the same schools, learned the same hard lessons about survival and loyalty. When Vincent started building his organization, Marco was among the first to join him. When Vincent needed someone he could trust, absolutely, Marco was always the answer, which made what happened next so devastating. Elena was refilling the sugar dispensers when she noticed the smell, bitter almonds mixed with something metallic, a scent she recognized from her chemistry classes but had never encountered in real life. Her head snapped up, eyes searching for the source. The 2 men in the corner booth were eating, talking quietly, seemingly unaware of any danger, but the smell was coming from their direction. She moved closer, pretending to clean nearby tables while straining to hear their conversation. Vincent was telling Marco about a shipment arriving at the docks next week. Marco was nodding, asking the right questions, playing the part of the loyal lieutenant perfectly. Too perfectly. Elena's nursing training had taught her to recognize the early signs of poisoning, the slight flush creeping up Vincent's neck, the way his hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he lifted his coffee cup, the subtle change in his breathing pattern, shallow and slightly labored. She looked at Marco, saw the way he was watching Vincent with clinical detachment, like a doctor monitoring a patient's vital signs, saw how he hadn't touched his own food, how his own coffee cup sat untouched beside his plate. The realization hit her like ice water. Marco wasn't here for a business meeting. He was here to watch Vincent die. Vincent had survived 3 decades in a world where betrayal was currency, where today's ally could become tomorrow's executioner. He had developed instincts that kept him alive through gang wars, federal investigations, and countless attempts on his life. But those instincts had a blind spot. They couldn't protect him from the people he loved most. Marco had been planning this for months. The territory dispute was real, but it wasn't with outside rivals. It was between Marco and Vincent's other lieutenants, a power struggle that Marco intended to end decisively. With Vincent gone, the organization would fracture, allowing Marco to seize control of the most profitable operations while his competitors fought over the scraps. The poison was elegant in its simplicity, tasteless, odorless when mixed with the right substances, designed to mimic a heart attack. Vincent would collapse, die within minutes, and the coroner would find nothing suspicious. Just another mobster whose lifestyle finally caught up with him. Marco had chosen the diner specifically because it was public enough to establish his alibi while remote enough to ensure minimal witnesses. He would play the grieving friend, call for an ambulance, cooperate fully with any investigation. By tomorrow morning, he would be attending Vincent's funeral while secretly dividing his territory. The plan was perfect, except for one variable Marco hadn't considered. A nursing student with sharp eyes and a conscience she couldn't ignore. Elena felt her heart hammering as she watched Vincent's condition deteriorate. His face was growing pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. Marco was still talking, still playing his part, but his eyes held the cold satisfaction of someone watching their enemy fall. She had maybe 2 minutes before the poison reached lethal levels in Vincent's bloodstream. 2 minutes to decide whether to get involved in something that could get her killed, or watch a man die while his best friend smiled and counted the seconds. Elena had never considered herself particularly brave. She avoided confrontation, paid her bills on time, kept her head down and her goals modest. But standing there watching Vincent struggle to breathe while Marco calculated his betrayal, she felt something ignite in her chest that had nothing to do with courage and everything to do with basic human decency. She couldn't let this happen. Not like this. Not while she had the knowledge and ability to stop it. Vincent tried to stand, his chair scraping against the floor as the room began to spin around him. His vision blurred, darkness creeping in from the edges as his body fought against the toxins flooding his system. "No, look at me," Elena said, her voice cutting through the fog of his consciousness. Before he could collapse completely, Elena made a choice that would haunt both their lives forever. She grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look directly into her eyes, and without hesitation, pressed her mouth to his. But this wasn't what it appeared to be. The other customers in the diner gasped. The cook dropped his spatula. Marco's carefully controlled expression cracked for just a split second before he recovered, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun beneath his jacket. Elena wasn't kissing Vincent. She was performing an emergency procedure she had learned in her medical training, forcing him to exhale the poisoned air trapped in his lungs before it could finish killing him. She breathed into him, pulled back to let him expel the toxins, then repeated the process. Her lips tasted the bitter residue of almonds and chemicals, confirming her worst fears about what Marco had done. Vincent's eyes widened as consciousness flickered back. His body convulsed once, twice, then he collapsed into Elena's arms, gasping for air, but unmistakably alive. "Call 911, Elena shouted to the cook, never taking her eyes off Vincent. "Poison! Someone poisoned him." Marco stood slowly, his face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What are you talking about?" "Vincent just collapsed. Maybe his heart, his coffee," Elena interrupted, her voice sharp with certainty. "Check his coffee cup. I can smell the cyanide compound from here." The word cyanide hung in the air like a death sentence. Marco's hand moved closer to his weapon. But before he could act, the diner's front door exploded inward. 3 men in dark suits burst through the entrance, guns already drawn, eyes scanning for threats. Vincent's security detail had been watching from the parking lot, maintaining their distance as instructed. But the commotion inside had triggered their protective instincts. "Boss!" The lead man, Tony Ricci, dropped to one knee beside Vincent, his weapon trained on Marco. "What happened?" Vincent struggled to sit up in Elena's arms, his voice barely a whisper. "Marco, the food. She saved me." Tony's eyes snapped to Marco, who had frozen with his hand halfway to his jacket. The other 2 bodyguards flanked him instantly, their intentions crystal clear. "Easy, Tony," Marco said, raising his hands slowly. "I'm just as shocked as you are. We were having dinner when Vincent collapsed. Thank God this young lady knew what to do." But Elena wasn't finished. Her nursing instincts had taken over completely, overriding any fear of the dangerous men surrounding her. "Someone needs to test that coffee immediately. The poison is still active. If anyone else drinks from that cup, they'll die within minutes." She turned to Vincent, checking his pulse, monitoring his breathing. "How do you feel? Any chest pain? Difficulty focusing?" Vincent stared at her with an expression that mixed gratitude with something deeper, a recognition that this stranger had not only saved his life, but had done so at enormous personal risk. "I'm alive because of you," he managed to say. Marco watched this exchange with growing desperation. His perfect plan was crumbling around him, and worse, he was surrounded by armed men who would kill him without hesitation if Vincent gave the word. He needed to regain control of the situation. Vincent, you're clearly in shock, Marco said, his voice taking on a soothing tone. This woman is confused. Why would anyone want to poison you? We've been friends for 30 years. Have we? Vincent interrupted, his strength returning along with his clarity of thought. He studied Marco's face with new eyes, seeing details he had missed before. The slight nervousness, the way Marco had insisted on this specific location, how Marco had brought the food from outside instead of ordering from the diner. Elena stood slowly, her uniform stained with coffee and her hands still shaking from adrenaline. I need to wash my hands and mouth, she said. That poison is still on my lips. Tony gestured to one of his men. Sal, go with her. Make sure she's safe. As Elena headed toward the restroom, Vincent pulled himself into a sitting position on the floor. The poison's effects were fading, but the betrayal was just beginning to sink in. 30 years, Vincent repeated, his voice growing stronger. You've been by my side for 30 years, Marco. You were at my wedding. You held my daughter when she was born. You were there when cancer took my wife. Marco's composure began to crack. Vincent, please. You're not thinking clearly. The poison, it's affecting your judgment. My judgment is fine, Vincent said, rising to his feet with Tony's help. Better than it's been in months, actually. Those territorial disputes you've been reporting, the ones that required so many private meetings, were those real, Marco? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Around the diner, the other customers had either fled or pressed themselves against the far walls, trying to become invisible. The cook had retreated to the kitchen, presumably calling the police as Elena had instructed. Marco's hand twitched toward his weapon again, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. His only chance was to maintain his innocence until he could find an opportunity to escape. I don't know what you're implying, Marco said carefully. If someone poisoned you tonight, we need to find out who. But it wasn't me, Vincent. It could never be me. Elena returned from the restroom, her face pale but determined. She had rinsed the poison residue from her mouth and hands, but the weight of what she had witnessed was clearly affecting her. The police will be here soon, she announced, and probably paramedics. You should go to the hospital for blood work. Make sure all the toxins are out of your system. Vincent nodded, but his attention remained fixed on Marco. Tell me about the food, Marco. Where exactly did you get it? Benedetto's, like I said. Your favorite place. And you carried it here yourself? Didn't let anyone else handle it? Marco hesitated for just a fraction of a second, long enough for Vincent to notice. Of course. I wanted to make sure it stayed warm. Elena stepped forward, her voice quiet but confident. The poison wasn't in the food. It was in the coffee. I could smell it when I got close to your table. Someone added it after you started drinking. All eyes turned to Marco, whose face had gone ashen. The coffee had been poured by Elena herself, served in clean cups from the diner's kitchen. The only person who had been close enough to add anything to Vincent's cup after that was the man sitting across from him. Vincent felt something die inside his chest, not from poison this time, but from the crushing weight of betrayal by someone he had loved like a brother. Why, Marco? Vincent asked, his voice barely audible. What could be worth 30 years of friendship? Marco's facade finally crumbled completely. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment, he looked every one of his 58 years. You know why, he said quietly. You've always known. The business is changing, Vincent. The old ways aren't working anymore. We need someone younger, someone who understands how to adapt. So you decided to kill me? I decided to save the organization, Marco replied, meeting Vincent's eyes for the first time since his collapse. Your way was going to get us all killed or arrested. The feds are closing in. The other families are getting stronger, and you're still operating like it's 1995. Elena listened to this exchange with growing horror. She had saved a man's life without knowing who he was or what he represented. Now she was learning that both men were criminals, that she had potentially saved one murderer from being killed by another. But as she watched Vincent's face, saw the genuine pain of betrayal, the way his hands shook not from poison but from heartbreak, She realized the situation was more complex than simple good versus evil. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with each passing second. Marco heard them too, and his desperation reached a breaking point. "Vincent, we can still fix this," he said urgently. "We can tell the police it was an outside attack. Someone trying to hurt both of us. We can—" "No," Vincent said firmly. "We can't fix this, Marco. You tried to murder me. You looked me in the eye, shared a meal with me and watched me die. There's no coming back from that." Tony and the other bodyguards waited for orders, their weapons still trained on Marco. One word from Vincent would end this permanently, but Vincent hesitated. Despite everything, despite the poison and the betrayal and the calculated cruelty of Marco's plan, 30 years of friendship couldn't be erased in a single moment. Elena saw his struggle and understood it in a way that surprised her. She had grown up in a neighborhood where loyalty was everything, where betrayal by family or close friends was considered the worst possible sin. She could see that Vincent was torn between justice and mercy, between protecting himself and honoring their shared history. The police sirens were getting closer. Within minutes, the diner would be swarming with cops, paramedics, and probably federal agents. Decisions made in the next few moments would echo for years to come. Years to come. Elena looked at Vincent, then at the approaching sirens, then back at Marco, who stood frozen between his former friend and certain death. Something in her nursing training kicked in, not the medical part, but the human part. The part that had taught her that sometimes healing meant making impossible choices. "Vincent," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "The police will be here in less than 2 minutes. Whatever you decide about Marco, decide it now. But remember, once they walk through that door, everything changes. For all of us." Vincent's eyes met hers, and in that moment, she saw something she hadn't expected. Not the cold calculation of a crime boss, but the wounded confusion of a man whose world had just shattered. The poison hadn't just attacked his body. It had destroyed his ability to trust his own judgment. Marco seized on the hesitation. "Elena's right, Vincent. We need to think about this logically. If you kill me here in front of witnesses, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Is that what you want? Is that what your daughter would want?" The mention of Vincent's daughter hit like a physical blow. Elena saw it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his breathing changed. She didn't know about his family, but clearly Marco was playing his final card. "Don't," Vincent said, his voice deadly quiet. "Don't you dare bring her into this. She's already in it." Marco pressed on desperately. "You think the feds won't use your arrest to go after everyone connected to you? You think they'll care that she's innocent? Your death tonight was supposed to protect her, Vincent. Clean slate, new leadership, no more federal attention." Elena felt sick. She was watching a friendship dissolve in real time, seeing how 30 years of shared history could become a weapon in the right hands. But she was also seeing something else. The way Vincent's men were looking at their boss, waiting for an order that might destroy everything they had built together. Tony stepped closer to Vincent, his voice low and urgent. "Boss, we need to move. Cops are maybe 90 seconds out. What's the call?" Vincent stared at Marco, his former best friend. The man who had shared his secrets and his sorrows, who had helped him bury his wife, and had promised to help him protect his daughter. The man who had just tried to murder him with the same casual efficiency he might use to order dinner. "You're right about one thing," Vincent said finally. "My daughter doesn't deserve to pay for my sins. Or yours." He turned to Tony. "Take Marco to the warehouse. Hold him until I decide what to do. No marks, no interrogation. Just hold him." Marco's relief was visible, but Elena could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was already planning his next move, already thinking about how to turn this temporary reprieve into permanent survival. "Vincent, you're making the right choice," Marco said, his voice thick with false gratitude. "We can work through this. We can—" "Shut up," Tony growled, grabbing Marco's arm with enough force to make him wince. You talk when the boss tells you to talk. As Tony and his partner escorted Marco toward the rear exit, Vincent turned to Elena. The sirens were close now, maybe 30 seconds away, and she could see the weight of leadership settling back onto his shoulders like a familiar coat. "You saved my life tonight," he said simply. "That creates a debt between us." Elena shook her head. "I don't want anything from you. I just did what anyone should do. But anyone didn't do it. You did. And in my world, that matters." The first police car pulled into the parking lot, its red and blue lights painting the diner's windows in alternating colors. Elena felt her heart rate spike as she realized how this was going to look. A waitress, a collapsed customer, signs of poisoning, and no clear explanation for what had happened. Vincent seemed to read her thoughts. "Don't worry. I'll handle the police. You were just doing your job, trying to help a customer who collapsed. You don't know anything about anything else." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that she couldn't just pretend she hadn't witnessed an attempted murder, hadn't seen the casual way Marco had prepared to watch his best friend die. But as the first officers pushed through the diner's front door, she realized that Vincent was offering her something more valuable than money or protection. He was offering her invisibility. In a world where witnesses to mob business tended to disappear, being invisible might be the only thing that kept her alive. "Ma'am, step away from the customer, please," the lead officer called out, his hand resting on his weapon as he took in the scene. 2 more cops followed him in, spreading out to secure the area. Elena raised her hands and moved back slowly. "He collapsed. I think someone poisoned his coffee. I was just trying to help him breathe." Vincent struggled to his feet, one hand pressed against the table for support. Despite everything, the poison had left him genuinely weak, and the effort of standing was clearly taxing. "Officer, my name is Vincent Torino. I was having dinner when I suddenly felt sick. This young lady probably saved my life with quick thinking." The lead cop's expression changed the moment he heard Vincent's name. Elena saw the recognition flicker across his face, followed quickly by wariness and something that might have been resignation. Everyone in the city knew who Vincent Torino was, including the police. "Mr. Torino, we'll need to ask you some questions about what happened tonight, and we'll need to test that coffee cup for substances." "Of course, officer. I'm as eager as you are to find out who might want to hurt me." Elena watched this exchange with growing amazement. Vincent's transformation was complete. From wounded victim back to composed crime boss, managing the situation with the same skill he probably used to run his organization. She was seeing firsthand how someone survived 30 years in a world where every conversation might be their last. The paramedics arrived next, wheeling in equipment and immediately focusing on Vincent's condition. Elena found herself pushed to the sidelines as professionals took over, checking his vital signs and preparing to transport him to the hospital for blood work. But as they loaded him onto a stretcher, Vincent caught her eye one more time. "Elena Martinez," he said, and she realized he had somehow learned her full name in the chaos of the evening. "I won't forget what you did tonight." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't quite a promise either. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered with the weight of absolute certainty. Elena understood that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The police kept her for 2 hours, asking the same questions in different ways, trying to understand how a nursing student had known to perform what they were calling an unorthodox, life-saving technique. Elena stuck to the truth as much as possible. She had smelled something wrong, recognized signs of poisoning, and acted on instinct to help. She didn't mention Marco's suspicious behavior. She didn't mention the conversation about territory disputes or betrayal. She certainly didn't mention the guns or the way Vincent's men had appeared with military precision. As far as the official record was concerned, she was simply a good Samaritan who had used her medical training to help a customer in distress. By the time they released her, dawn was breaking over the city. Elena walked out of the police station exhausted, emotionally drained, and acutely aware that her normal life had ended the moment she decided to save Vincent Torino's life. Her phone buzzed with a text from her nursing school study group, asking if she was still planning to attend their review session that morning. Elena stared at the message, trying to reconcile her academic world with what she had just experienced. How was she supposed to sit in a classroom discussing medical ethics when she had spent the night watching a mafia boss nearly die from poisoning by his best friend? She typed back that she wasn't feeling well and needed to skip the session. It was the first lie she had told about the events of the night, but she suspected it wouldn't be the last. Elena took the bus back to her apartment, watching the city wake up around her. People heading to work, grabbing coffee, starting their normal Tuesday morning routines, completely unaware that a few miles away, a friendship had died, and a waitress had stepped into a world she didn't understand. As she climbed the stairs to her small studio apartment above the bakery, Elena tried to convince herself that it was over. Vincent would recover, the police would investigate, and eventually everything would return to normal. She would finish nursing school, find a job at a hospital, and this night would become just an unusual story she might tell someday. But even as she thought it, Elena knew she was wrong. Vincent Torino didn't seem like the kind of man who forgot debts, good or bad, and Marco Castellano was still alive, still dangerous, still capable of seeing her as a threat to his survival. Elena unlocked her door and stepped inside, immediately noticing something that made her blood run cold. Her apartment was exactly as she had left it. Almost. The stack of textbooks on her desk had been moved slightly. The coffee cup she had left by the sink was now positioned differently. Someone had been here while she was at the police station. Someone had searched her apartment. Elena's hands trembled as she checked her bedroom, her bathroom, looking for signs of what the intruder might have taken or left behind. Everything seemed normal, but the violation was clear. Her safe little world had been breached, and she suspected she knew why. Marco might be in Vincent's custody, but that didn't mean he didn't have other people working for him. People who might want to ensure that the only witness to his betrayal couldn't cause problems later. Elena sat on her bed, finally allowing herself to cry. Not from fear, though that was certainly present, but from the overwhelming realization that her choice to save a stranger's life had pulled her into a conflict she couldn't understand, much less navigate safely. Her phone rang, startling her. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer. "Miss Martinez?" The voice was polite, professional, with a slight accent she couldn't place. "Yes? My name is Vincent Torino. I believe we need to talk." Elena's breath caught. The voice was weaker than it had been in the diner, strained from the night's events, but unmistakably his. "Mr. Torino, someone searched your apartment while you were with the police. My people have been watching your building since you left the station. You're not safe there anymore." The simple statement hit Elena like a physical blow. Her worst fears were confirmed. Saving Vincent's life had painted a target on her back that she couldn't simply wash away. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Right now, I want to keep you alive. Long term? That's more complicated." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her new reality settling around her like chains. "I just wanted to help someone. I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," Vincent replied, and for the first time since she'd met him, his voice carried something approaching gentleness. "But sometimes the right thing and the safe thing aren't the same. You chose right. Now let me help you live with the consequences." A black sedan pulled up outside her window as if summoned by his words. Elena watched through her curtains as two men in dark suits stepped out, their eyes scanning the street with professional efficiency. "There's a car waiting downstairs," Vincent continued. "My men will take you somewhere safe while we figure out how to handle Marco's people. This isn't a request, Elena. It's the only way you survive what comes next." Elena looked around her small apartment, at her nursing textbooks, her carefully organized life, her dreams of a quiet career helping people heal. All of it felt suddenly fragile, as temporary as morning frost. "And if I refuse?" Then I'll respect your choice, but I won't be able to protect you from the consequences. Elena understood. Vincent was offering her a lifeline, but it came with strings attached. Strings that would bind her to his world in ways she couldn't yet imagine. She grabbed her purse, her nursing textbooks, and the photo of her parents from her nightstand. Everything else could be replaced. "I'm coming down," she said into the phone. "Good. Elena, what you did tonight, saving my life when you had every reason to walk away. That kind of courage is rare in any world. Don't let anyone convince you it was a mistake." The line went dead. Elena took one last look around her apartment, knowing she might never see Vincent again.